This time had to come. In this, the opening statement, attention now passed to the judge. So I ask you this, Supreme Court of Justice, Judge, do you solemnly swear to Almighty God, Creator of heaven and earth, that you will stand by our Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and its Canadian Constitution and use it to bring justice by its fairness, as apologies, reimbursements, reparations, fiduciary, and incivility, as peace is needed, as a payment of respect in the case of defending your home and protecting your family? That, by your sworn duties, these provisions of honest evidence, not that made of fiction, are to be of true force and effect. Is that an agreement? Because I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God. Because truth is my sword, and karma is my shield. When love conquers all.
So, Judge, why I called this together to bring into question of my concerns over the regarding statements which I am about to address is that they are all tied in. And as I have promised you the whole truth and nothing but the truth, it means giving you the full truth and nothing but the truth. It shows the tie-in of everything that needs to be addressed, because one thing supports another thing affects another, and another thing is overall tied in because of the same thing that's being addressed. Because, speaking as a couple, the both of us have never had our chance at fair trial or had our side really acknowledged, accepted, or understood. And now it's about time that we are given the chance to be able to defend ourselves. And I myself, standing up for myself and my partner, who momentarily cannot speak for herself, as I defend our home and family. So when I bring these issues I address today to you, my judge, my jury, to use the highest authority of kindness in respect to the application of the force and effect that will be applied, because as bad as the things I describe, they may seem so horrific that it would lead to an execution or life sentencing or just vaporization, ablation. Instead, as I said, we are not to become the demon by killing the demon and be as bad as the criminals that we are dealing with. So I request that you, Judge, please do the things that I cannot do myself as a person, but because you, my Judge, are going to be presented the things that I have proven to myself, and by revealing to you, I show you what it is exactly that I mean. As these things I present have proven to me to be very, very inconsistent with the provisions of our Constitution, Charter of Freedoms and Rights, inalienable rights of our universal Charter of Human Rights and Freedoms, that we all here in this world are provided and deserve. Even the animals have rights.
Because of the two major issues I find to be very concerning that I present here, because two major issues have factors that interplay between each other, making a causation of a duality of problem, which in this court we should be able to address. And if not all here, we'll have two courts running with the same thing, because the whole truth includes it being all of the truth, not just talking about one little part here. But if we're going to start at any point, it would be the day that I'd gotten the notice to relative that my sweet common law loving partner, Alice Jane Burton, had been detained at RCH. Right at that point, that means the doctors and nurses, they should have been talking to me. They should have been letting me know how it's going, because I've been quite concerned about her medication that they're forcing on her non-consensually, as is involuntary, happens to be clozapine. Now, clozapine, if you haven't heard anything about clozapine, it's been banned in Europe since 1970, killed way too many patients. And after all, if you remember anything about the Nuremberg Codex, I believe in Europe it's Nuremberger, but we know it as the Nuremberg Codex. And it clearly states that a patient is, or experiment, living human experiment, let's call it, because you never know what the outcome of these treatments are. That's what makes psychiatry always a experimental practice. And if the experimentalness of it has ever been removed, then the medicine itself is still. And if you guys all know that these anticholinergics are murder, then still that would go against the Nuremberg Codex as well, because a patient is not to be harmed. And when we're talking about the use of anticholinergics, an anticholinergic happens to be an antipsychotic, or an antidepressant, or an anticonvulsant, an antidepressant, or an anti-Parkinson's, an antihistamine. There's plenty of opioids, opiates. Like it causes delirium because when it causes hallucinations and the disorganized thinking, the things that you call schizophrenia, when it's actually medication induced, because it rips out your nervous system by cutting off the vitamin uptake, and that cuts off your immune system too, because the two are tied in together through an endocrine system of our blood and hormone messengers. So when we're talking about the stage before erythrocytes, then we're talking about our immune system, our lymphocytes and our neutrophils and such, the white blood cells that carry our sodium reactions with the calcium and sodium. Anticholinergics essentially cut off the uptake of our vitamin B. So what ends up happening is, if you ever heard of vitamin deficiency describing scurvy or anemia, well, essentially this is the reason why, okay? In the case of clozapine, which is an anticholinergic, it cuts off your vitamin uptake, causing a granulocytosis. That means a compromised immune system, which has been described to many as HIV/AIDS. Now, if these signs point to that the lymphopenia that leads to cancer because of the stopping of an immune system, meaning a compromised immune system, that the only way that people get cancer is that they already are experiencing HIV/AIDS because it's a compromised immune system after all. Then we are taking a look at the practice of these anticholinergics a little bit more seriously, I hope. If they were only designed to create an industry, then that means that the greater public has been enslaved to death. And that would outline problems dating all the way back to the war and that Nuremberg trial. We get the Nuremberg Codex, and where patients are not to be harmed. And that is a fact. And when it comes to involuntary, didn't Abraham Lincoln already free the slaves? Didn't we already have a British end slavery in 1833? Didn't we just have a Supply Chains Act put in place in 2024? So involuntary, that means to anyone, it means slavery. And as I just described what euthanasia is, especially when all of the cancer service, cancer foundations, all of that, all of the AIDS foundations, all that money-grubbing foundations that take charity money and all that away from the people that need it to live or to be able to survive in this world. There are people dying on the street, and the streets are definitely a death sentence. As I pointed out, that when we talk about anticholinergics, that includes opiates and opioids. So why would anyone force an opiate addiction on someone involuntary, especially so non-consensual? We only define non-consensual and rape to be tied in, because that's exactly how you define what rape is. And when we're talking about involuntary, being just what nobody wants. If anybody wanted it, it'd be voluntary to them, and it wouldn't be involuntary anymore. So involuntary sticks to as being just that nobody wants it. That would mean that it goes against every single provision of our constitutional rights and amendments in the United States and our Canadian Constitution in our Canadian Charter of Human Rights and Freedoms, which are the laws that preside over all other laws all across this land and all across the world when we look at the Universal Charter of Human Rights and Freedoms and our inalienable rights. So what is needed, more than anything, is the need for change is evident, so change is what is needed. When it comes to the way of how we have our system designed, because for one thing, psychology happens to be purely educational, and to learn psychology teaches you just nothing medical about it. However, medical itself, when you see that they're just creating their own industry, like a bunch of Munchausen syndrome by proxies, and that term is a psychological term for a psychiatrist who injures their client, so the client has to turn to them for treatment, which in this case, the anticholinergic, just causes more problems, okay? And that's pretty much enslavement, especially when you're applying involuntary aspect to it, which is what nobody wants, So just see it for what it is, okay? See it for what it is. Ask anyone from Africa, are you down with doing a little involuntary until you die? They would probably probably freak out, okay? Because that means some reparations are in order, okay? Like, I'm serious. Like, freeing the slaves, the abolition of the slavery that's taking place as involuntary patients go. And what we are going to have to do about these off-the-charts records about how many murders have taken place when we see AIDS is having over 100 million deaths and cancer, which, again, compromised immune system described by the anticholinergic treatments, is around 10 million a year. Now, if we're looking at global numbers, okay, global numbers, this affects a great population of our global numbers, seeing as there's 8 billion people in the world. And when we're talking about hundreds of millions of people, that's a good chunk of the entire world. Now, I'm not saying to do away with medical practice or medical knowledge. No, have it a part of our basic education and to learn it right, to learn it correctly. That way we can, protect our families. We can treat our own wounds, and if we need to get X-rays done, I'm sure that there will be clinics available. However, X-rays themselves, that does a lot of damage as well to the person. That's what's with the lead, coverings because of sterilization, which you get informed of, but it's not like you have any choice in that once you're in the room. But smile. So anyway, try and make the best of what we got, and hopefully we get this resolved, because obviously this type of enslavement and murder, it cannot continue. It cannot take place, and it dates all the way back to, well, yeah, the Nuremberg War, Second World War, as you know, around here, the war that followed the Great War, because essentially Germany had no money for any military. They were totally bankrupt. Their money meant nothing. Like, it still is nothing. When we look at a 1910 Deutschmark, worth 1,000 Deutschmarks would be a year's wage over there back then. And now, even still to this day, even though it's over 100 years old, like, should be at least considered old money, it's only worth like $1.90 or something on eBay. It's absolutely nothing. Now, because they had no money, as soon as Dr. Warburg had published his Hallmarks of Cancer, of how to cultivate your neoplasm in another person by these methods, which was a sales pitch of how to get their economy going, and new face of their war with their manipulation and enslavement, they had been, well, winning invisibly, because we still have the doctrine of how our medical should work. Like, we are supposed to have a hospital system to help people, but do we need a hospital system at all is a question, especially when we're talking usually you only go to a hospital if you have injury. And if it's just mainly the cancer and the AIDS and these type of issues, like of disease that's caused by anticholinergic, like neurological diseases like Parkinson's and such, like epilepsy, it's really horrific. That's why it has to end now, because after all, an anticholinergic is what we consider a drug, and that's supposed to be banned and illegal, whereas medicine actually derives from our vitamins, and that means all the performance-enhancing vitamin are like they're metabolites that through our metabolic system is how we attain these type of medicines, and a healthy diet is really what's needed. If you remember the 4 healthy food groups that we were taught about a long time ago, well, that is the type of health that we need. We need that more than anything. We need the wholesome, honest truth, and the whole truth. Like, you gotta understand what I'm talking about, because I myself, I understand medical science perfectly, as well as I understand psychology very well indeed, because I didn't happen to read the Douglas College curriculum that my mother had when she was taking the courses, and I skimmed through the book as quickly as I could. I was really more interested in learning something that was interesting, and well, it seems to help, and I suggest it for everyone. Like, a part of our education system, have a reform system of our education system where we don't need imprisonments either, any form of imprisonment, because essentially, why do you get punished? So you learn something, isn't it? You want them to learn something, because if they learn the wrong things, obviously, like, they go squirrely and get right into all these different aspects of criminality, because now they think that's all they are, and they can't get a job, and they're just doomed to that. So, but they're getting released in the couple, so then they're leased out onto the public, doing all this type of stuff. Where if we were to teach them the golden rule, we were to teach them about religion, because religion essentially relays on perfectionism and the golden rule in any culture, because we all speak different languages. The story came out a little bit differently for all of us, but we still have that core where we gotta love thy neighbors, we love thyself. It means like an eye for an eye. It means it means balance. Like a yin and the yang. So because cause and effect. That's basically the structure of karma when we look at the law of averages. That's maybe a red card will go, but that means because red card already happened, black card's gonna happen. Right, so that's how we got to see it, and by understanding this type of stuff, now we have to sort it out, because through an education system. Now, if we're talking about a residential education system where the money from all of the medical goes into our education system instead, where we also have housing for all of the poor people who get an education and can learn hands-on, be paid for that hands-on time as a trainee would. Like a trainee, they're getting their education hands-on right then and there. So if we're to take a look at what's already in the associations of our communities, then we already see a structure that has kind of forged itself. Time and time again, this is how it's done. It shows you how it is supposed to be unveiled. But when, say, within a working system, we find these cogs to be maintained, especially when pointing out maintenance workers don't have much time doing maintenance work. They essentially wait around, like they fix something, it's good for a couple of years. That became a problem at our residence here. Now, when talking about the pest control, providing the own pests, like by a video that I caught them placing mice in the apartment through the underneath the water heater crawl space area, which now it's been filled in with foam, so I don't believe they're going to be doing that anymore. But so it relates to people creating their own industry, and problem is, because that's a kind of criminal thing, we got to address it, okay? Because I want my Alice to come home to a safe place where we're not being harassed by the people that stole our items. And this is what we have to get back, because when I got my notice to relative that Alice is being held as involuntary, I myself got pulled into involuntary when I got denied my visitation rights. I asked them to check my foot, because at home my feet were being torched from underneath. Now, thing is, though, people may not imagine this happening, but yeah, they injured me with heat guns from just below in the crawl space and made videos showing it. And I did have a physician after a month and a half of serving involuntary who would check my feet. And as soon as I got my feet checked, and I was to be released within a week after they had pre-applied and bandaged, I began getting calls and communication from the residential tenancy home of BC Housing, where Alice and I live now. Thing is, they wanted in to get a mattress, take my bed because it had bed bugs, and they couldn't get in. They thought I changed locks, but the tip of my key broke off in the lock, and only my key would open the door. So I was to come home within that week, and they really needed in, so they got locksmith and let themselves in on premise to get the bed. However, by the video that shows Alice's parents, who had been let into the apartment before, they had claimed that they were looking for her passport because she's no longer a tenant. This means that her parents trashed the apartment looking for this passport, because in the video they provided shows an overturned chair in the bedroom and a mattress, meaning the bed's still there. I mean, they were there first. And they trashed the place. It was staged. It was like, they were covering the surface area. There wasn't much coverage. It was all personal items was the main problem. And those personal items were of value, but it was staged. It was staged to look like it, but they continued to smash the items, because in the video you see Alice's dad actually flip something like a stack of picture frames or plates or even a glass table, just a big smash, and that's right in the video. And in that video it does show one of the cameras as well on the table with film equipment and stuff like camera cages, which again, all of those items were taken, and I can provide pictures of things, some like the music equipment, including a $6,000 Gretsch White Falcon, which was kind of cream colored actually, but beautiful guitar and unique. Close to $6,000 on that item alone means grand theft over 5,000, which is pretty bad. When we're talking about personal items, we're also talking about sentimental items. Sentimental items that have great value, But as well, we did have items that had great value, like our MacBook Pro Max that I bought from the Apple Store online. So it didn't have a printed receipt from the company, but did have a Visa statement that shows the purchase. So, and it says Apple on it, so unmistakable. There was a couple other purchases that was related to it that brought the price from about $9,300 and then another $400 tacked on. So that's why I say close to about $10,000 just for that alone. But personal items, like if I'm going to list everything right now, I suppose we could get into that. I want to tell you kind of the span of everything, and then we can kind of get back into details afterwards, after you hear what happened. Because when our stuff was all taken, and this includes jewelry, like jewels and coins and stuff, that's, again, like the Prince Charles and Diana wedding, 1981, and the silver jubilee, silver dollar, because that's like an ounce of silver, but it's like commemorative. Little details like that, naming everything would take quite a long time, considering that, there are items that are irreplaceable. But along with the items are last year's tax forms that had like our SIN numbers, and so identity theft, our bank information, our Visa statements, all have the codes on the bills and stuff. All of our paperwork was taken, for the most part, all of it, but there was a little bit left. Our receipts for the cameras were included in some of the stuff that was taken. So you see, there was a lot of stuff that didn't need to get removed, because by the time I got home, the place looked like it was gutted. And after a couple of days, some more things kept on disappearing, and it wasn't very good, like some gym bags and whatnot, designer ones that had gotten saved up for Alice and I, because she deserves good things because of what type of experience that she's had in the past. If she ever got a chance to explain it, she told me on camera before. I recorded it because I knew there would come a day. I knew there would come a day that this all had to be described and explained. So speaking for her and speaking for us both, because she got threatened with eviction if she didn't sign an end tenancy agreement. And they came straight to the hospital in RCH, which is from Vancouver through Burnaby, and then you reach New Westminster, but you keep going, and it's almost at Coquitlam. So that much of a distance. They came over, and they hadn't made entry yet, because that's the thing about Alice's dad and Frank Warren Burton showing up like before the mattress was removed, meaning that's their method of getting us to pay for the locksmith, because they needed in to get the bed that they promised they were going to replace, which was the reason why I kind of went along with it. But thing is, my key would have opened the door just fine if they waited for me to come home, like within that week. But it seemed like a big rush. Like they had to scam everything they could before I got home. It's like they didn't know that I wasn't here until they tried making some type of entry. Now, if the entry was originally, because Alice's parents wanted in, when we got this apartment, we were escaping horrible parental abuse, and it was our refuge. And we were promised that they would not be allowed to come around or in our apartment, especially when we weren't there. And this is exactly what happened. For them to be such a level of parental abuse that they had somehow like colluded or paid off or promised that the staff here that they could have our stuff, or if they took it, we don't know. But the BC Housing was involved with letting them in, which they shouldn't have. And Igor promises. So when Igor stopped working here and Michael Ho had came in, things got a little bit worse, because it seemed like that's when we began experiencing the foot torching, and we were experiencing the feeling of something liquid pouring on our heads. So looked into it and found out online it meant permeable liquids. Now, I'm not saying it was formaldehyde, but that is an example of a permeable liquid. What does permeability mean? It means it can pass through solid objects, like, say, gas and whatnot, or high pressure, whatever. If you're to spray, say, dry ice blast, which they use in hazmat, up against wall, you're going to feel it on the other side. That's a fact. If you are, say, welding or anything like that, this would be directed heat, Now, to put it into a comparison of where they would have learned these methods, if someone told you that there was some show where it explained all of this, where they had a heat coil underneath the Bible, so when the person put their hand on to swear to the Bible, it would, sizzle or cook, and they would, be getting afraid if they were guilty. And they also have heat coils and heat guns underneath the person's feet that they controlled when and how much heat to apply to get the type of reaction they wanted. Now, if that is what takes place inside a courtroom where these things are learned, then we really have to see the seriousness of the situation. Because, for one thing, lasers have been around for many, many, many years, but the prohibited ones are above 20 joules. 20 joules would cause an injury with a heat laser, for instance, because if people are bringing those into courtrooms and kind of irritating people by hitting them with it occasionally, making someone itch their nose, or that grazes their ear. This is some type of control, like an MK Ultra situation, which this really shouldn't take place. And to make you aware of it, that some of the criminals this has been practiced on have learned how to do this type of thing and have gone full out on it. Because I myself, I'm covered in injuries that I've been trying to sterilize and heal using methods of just good health, like taking a bunch of salt and drinking a bunch of milk. So you have that calcium, sodium calcium reaction that is all about our immune system. So anyway, as I described, if you would only think, what type of show was that? As I said, videos describe as well. So I'll include all of that type of thing. So, but yeah, I sustained injuries. The physician at the hospital described it as lacerations, which went, neglected, medical neglect, which that's a, law term for deserves to be sued, and that's what we're here for. There's a lot of medical injuries taking place. In fact, when we take a look at what happened with my best friend Goran, he actually was complaining about it being too high dose for them to lower it, and they jacked it up, and now he's dead. And that was right before the pandemic, and right after I'd won a review panel then. But I won a review panel that I filed in February, right after getting out of the hospital. And I'd won that because the doctor was caught lying about the medication, lying about the effects of it, lying about that in front of the panel of judges who knew better and knew that something was definitely not right. And, I did have an opportunity to go tugboat chefing, but the problem is, that tugboat, it didn't work. It got sabotaged, is what we're told. That someone put a bunch of sugar in the gas tank. He had to get new, well, I'm not a mechanic. The cylinders, big cylinders, but a new engine, basically. The whole thing is seized up. So when he said that it would be, ready, and I already had these court cases in place, so I wasn't able to go out for, the work that I was hoping to get this year. But speaking of losing money on work, the business tools, the laptop and the cameras and such, because those were my business tools, I was unable to work for that entire time, meaning that the opportunities that I missed from being able to event document like weddings and such, or event document at shows, music shows, theater shows, wherever permitted, live festivals and such. That was what I was doing before the pandemic, and having to learn so much just to try and save Alice, because like she's number one in my world, and I love her, and it's been a total nightmare. Considering that as soon as I began asking about what happened to our stuff, there was a investigation, a BC housing investigation, where I was supposed to hear back from. But as soon as I started asking about that and requested that my toilets got unplugged, then I started experiencing problems with BC housing. Now, see, in March, we had requested that BC Housing inform the hospital that she was not evicted, that she could return. But then the hospital didn't really have an email for that to receive. So we were hoping that we could get it ourselves to give to him, because we could print it off or whatever, make it a physical copy. But Michael Ho refused to give any information like that. He was very secretive about everything. It seemed very strange. Didn't know what to think about that at that point, though. But when I began asking more about the investigation later on, all of a sudden, this new, maybe he isn't new, but I have never seen him before. They called him Merritt, but someone tried telling me it was Mike Savick, but I thought Mike Savick was the little bald guy that wears camouflage and talks about hunting all the time. Anyway, whoever the building manager actually is at this place, they should probably make it more public and more accessible to be in contact with them, because they don't seem very communicative. Because when I thought I was going to get my toilets fixed in August, and the guy Merritt shows up, and he seemed pretty mad, like he'd seen the toilet, and he just I wanted him to fix it. He began complaining about it, and he wrote in his report something about there being animal poo on it, when the toilet was just full. There was no poo on it, on top of the toilet. So, and I don't have any pets, so it just kind of points out what type of childish imagery this guy hallucinates to get out of doing something for the people who are paying rent here that he's actually supposed to be working for and not against. But anyway, he began doing a second yearly inspection report, and these inspection reports are usually done yearly. That's what makes them annually. So when he began doing that, I thought it very strange, but he began writing horrible reviews, saying the walls were from 1 to 4, a 4. In other words, completely destroyed, because this happened to have been a damage report. And he tried describing the stove as being, again, completely destroyed, needed so much maintenance and repair that it might as well be replaced, and trying to get me to pay for it in the following letter. That before that letter, I had gotten a letter that wanted to raise the rent. The rent raisal had come in right on the 13th of August, and it's wanted to go from up to now 453. I'm not sure what I'm paying right now, but I thought it was in the 300s, and that's well over the percentage that's allowed of 3% increase. So this is what I mean. It followed the second yearly report, which on this yearly report it says that I have a kitchen fan, and I got a 2. So the kitchen fan was damaged. However, on the first report, it clearly says NA. There is no kitchen fan, and you can clearly see there's no kitchen fan. There's not even a fan in the bathroom. Thank you. There is no fan here. But like I said, weaponized delirium. He hallucinated a fan in the kitchen that happened to be so damaged that it required 2. So, noticeable. When we're talking about sink counter traps in the kitchen, 2, okay. Cupboards, drawers in the kitchen, a 3. That's pretty damaged. That's like saying that's a Rottweiler chewed on it, but it still opens and closes, but you know what I mean? Or maybe doors broken off, or it doesn't, well, anyway, it describes fire damage, basically, all of this, especially when the common items, meaning the living room, the paint gets a 4, which would relate to absolute vandalism, like spray painting, and, how else could of a 1 to 4, you got 4 on the paint. The flooring, a 4, again, describes it being gouged out and actually it damaged. This is a damage report after all. Doors, closet, 3. Fixtures, outlets, 3. Where he was giving me a hard time about the TELUS outlets, that the TELUS guy had left a little crook open because he was going to have my cable fixed, and it took a while for the cable to get completely sorted out. But now I have that. I don't believe I've watched any television at all. But it's good to have cable. And here it also says smoke detector a 2. That means it's been damaged. And the heat and hot water a 2. Is he saying something about the entire building in itself? Like there's a problem with the heat and hot water? Okay, well, this is what I mean. Like, the cupboards are fine, and I could clearly show in videos, no problem. Disprove everything on that paper so bad. But the thing is, though, when I had tried addressing my concerns that if that damage report was to stay affixed to my rental housing record, that I'd never see the day that I ever got to live in a rude situation where I had, in other words, be homeless for the rest of my life, because I wouldn't be able to rent anywhere if that type of garbage was believed by anyone. And believe me, if I don't clear this and make this obvious, that this was an attempt at my life. Considering that when I had addressed my concerns, I get a final warning letter, and it's that's a threat. That's an actual written threat that you can clearly see, because and there's no previous warnings either. That's the thing. When saying that personal items, food scraps scattered all throughout the unit's floor was complete and total garbage, because there was no food scraps. Like he said what type of food it was, but he didn't take any photographs either. Debris and animal waste found splattered all over toilet and flooring. Then that again, a horrific lie, just weaponized delirium, a hallucination that he made up because the kitchen and sink area full of cigarette butts, dirty containers, and grime. Well, to describe that properly, yes, there was an ashtray that was in there, and I placed in it. It wasn't doing anything wrong. The place, it was a little bit grimy, but I just have to wash these containers, he says, which are, the dishes themselves. So look at the criticality of it, okay? I'm getting threats over this. And he's saying the rental unit overall is extremely unsanitary in the midst of foul odor. Well, that's coming from the toilet that I asked him to unplug, and he had ignored that for a month. And whenever I came back to ask again about it, or address these hate mail letters of threats, then I get told that I'm the one who's threatening. If I point out simple facts like, you're a crook, you should go to jail, you're probably going to get deported, you tell them, right? And, I think deportation would actually be one of the best things for someone who comes to this country and doesn't play right, because all their friends and family and all that stuff, that's back home where they came from. And if they do that type of stuff there, maybe that's why they don't want to go back, is they burned every bridge and pissed off all the people. So you got to look at it that way. That, how could home be unwelcoming? So if they're doing this type of thing here, so something that we're going to have to address, obviously, because when we're talking about some type of punishment, where we are trying to avoid the whole punishing thing, there's always, Antarctica box factory, for anyone who's being totally facing the golden rule, after all, like threatening eviction and all that type of stuff, and deportation being pretty much the same thing, but deportation being there's a home to go back to, home where you came from. But and the eviction note of it, that's the same as any banishment to Antarctica, I suppose, especially in the winters here in Canada, where if you're sleeping on a sidewalk in a big ice puddle, you're not going to live all that long. You have to admit, Now, that's kind of the thing that they had planned for me by telling their lies to cover for the stuff they stole. And they continued sending me threatening letters of hate mail, where, in fact, one of them had completely amazed me. It actually said on it, violence means the attempted or actual exercise by a person other than the worker, meaning that, they're kind of excluding the worker from, and includes any threatening statement or behavior which gives the worker reasonable cause to believe he or she is at risk of injury. Well, what about the person? They didn't include the person there, because if they're saying that violence and threats are disallowed except other than the worker, the worker's allowed to do it, because what we see here is a whole bunch of hate mail and threats, especially when it's revolving around pointing out how to describe someone as, when they're being arrogant and cocky, smug, and being just some type of a little gangster. And when looking at a BC housing where they seem to be backing each other up, but maybe if they seen what was going on, they wouldn't want to be a part of it. I don't know these people personally, but we're going to have to take all of them aside and find out exactly what psychology remains in their thinking minds, because to be aware of what you are doing and what you're saying and how violent a description of the damage report was, because it was basically describing a total renovation, like fire damage. And the worst part is when the date wasn't filled out right, it said 08/blank/ 2024, meaning that, what was that, day, month, year? Like, that kind of seems subsequent. Leaving out the month would only say that they're planning to fill it in at another time, because, after all, when we are looking at a damage report this ugly, they would not admit to what their motives were, especially when it was brought on when I was asking about the BC housing investigation. And this had to do with how Alice got put in the psych ward, because her parents, like, as soon as we began looking into having her ring appraised, because we seen something online that it was a Renaissance ring. It was like $85,000. So, thought we better find out how much this is worth, because it seems to be one of the oldest, rarest things that could be made of gold. But since then, I've noticed that I was actually able to find one that looked identical to, but it makes me wonder if that's actually the ring itself. And I would like to look into reclaiming it because of the sentimental value behind it. But in order to do that, we might have to get some type of fiduciary to be able to cover the costs and make the replacements if they are given back. If they were only put into some type of holding where they were holding on to it, waiting for the statute of limitations to run out and then unload it, well, guess what? If they still have all our stuff, we'd greatly appreciate it back, and that would show some respect. And after all, because Alice herself was not evicted, she should